Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Zevachim daf Mem Ches. We are going to begin at the very top of Mem Ches and Aleph in the famous parak called Ezim and Kaiman. So we now continue with the next part of the Mishnah, Par V'Sar Shel Yom Kippurim. So just like when it comes to the Kachi Kadashim, like an oil and a chatas, so too when it comes to the par and the Sar of Yom Kippur, which is done almost basically the entire avoda by the Kohen Gadol, the shechita is in the north. So michti safayin ba'oiluksev. We know that when it talks about the obligation regarding bringing an oilas at sign, the pasuk says v'shachad oso al yeracham is sfona. It says explicitly it's supposed to be in the north. So nisni oila bereisha. Why don't we talk about the ola first? Why do we bring this down? So your answers, chatas, I did asmid rasha chavivole. And this is an answer we often find because there's a pasuk that says b'makam asher tishchat oila, the same place where the oil is brought, the chatas is brought. So even though you have a beferish pasuk, sometimes we mention something which is a drasha first because that's something which you're excited about. So when you're excited, you want to bring it up. You want to talk about it right away. Okay, so why don't we talk about the chatas that is brought on the outer mizbeach, which is also a drasha. So I did the nichnas the minlef nilef nim chavivale, because we were talking about the par of the sire, in which not only is it chaviv, but it's something in which we actually go into the Kadosh Kadashim and we do 8 sprinklings of the par, 8 of the sa'ir, and that's even more chaviv. So where is it written? So we just quoted the pasuk from Rashi, but of course it's a beferish pasuk. It says in Vayikra, v'shachad oisal yerachas hamizmech sfaina. It says beferish is in the north. So ashchen ben sain. That's only if we're talking about an oil which is a sheep, because that's what it says explicitly. It's talking about a tzayin. Ben bakar ben nolan. How do we know that the same din applies if it's a bakar? So Amar Krav im min tzayin vav moisev al inyan rishoin v'amid eliyam metachtoin. The fact there's a vav, it tells us that it doesn't make any difference if it's a tzayin or a bakar. The din is the same. That it's also in the north. Now, not everyone learns these types of drushes of vav can be moisef desanya, because the pasuk it says like this: im nefesh v'gaimer. So the im nefesh, it says, it's a lot of psukim over here, so it's actually curls around the Gemara. If someone sins, so obviously this is talking about a chatos. Actually, it's an asham. Just come to tell you that you're chayiv even by suffik me'ilos to bring an asham taloi. So even though we know an asham taloi is when a person is not sure, did they do wrong, did he make a mistake? It was chaylev, it was shuman, which is brought down at the beginning of Masechtas Horayos, but as well as other places. So in this case, even a suffix me'ila, the din is the same. Let's look at Rashi. Gabi ashim toliksiv. So Rashi says beferish. L'mali mena parshas me'ila. Above that is me'ila. Vadoyis. So you have an ashim toli pasuk and an ashim Vadai pasuk. Shiyad l'achar zman shenehenim in a hektish b'shayge l'chaim l'asham vadai. So we say al savig me'ilos hektish l'chulin lefanav v'nehenim ech mehen. It was either chulin or hektish because some are shnei and chulin, but you thought both of them were chulin. V'yachshav ein yodem ez mehem nehena maybe asham toli lahagim ne'isurin. So you at least will protect you from yisurin until hopefully the matter will become resolved. But we say that there's a connection between the Asham Taloi and the Asham Vadai as the Psukim are linked. Chachamim poitrin. So my lab hakamivli. Mar savar lamidin, mar savar ein lamidin. So maybe the fact that we say by suffix me'ilois that you have to bring an asham taloi, so that's because we learn out this drasha with a vav. But if you don't, then you're potter. So Rav no, the kuliyam lamidin. So if everyone holds lamidin, so then why do we have the opinion that the chacham is poitrin? So v'hainu tam de rabbanan nemerkan mitzvahs and nemer bechatas chela mitzvahs. It says over here the word mitzvahs, but regarding an asham tolei, it says that, and it also says it by a chatas chelav, which is just a regular carbon chatas. It also says mitzvahs. So malu holan davar shechayvin al zanon kares hashgaso chatas avkan shechayavin al zanon kares hashgaso chatas. So when it comes to me'ilah, there is no chiyuv chatas. So therefore, since there's no chiyuv chatas by me'ilah, there's also not going to be an asham tolei either. Okay, there would be an asham vadai, but there's no din chatas. So the only time is dafka when it comes to that b'shoigeg you would have to bring a chatas, but we don't find that when it comes to me'ilah. Says Rashi, asham tolei einu ba el safik chatas kavua. It says, oh, actually we didn't see that yet. Ma chatas ba shgagas zaden kares af asham tolei al safik darish zaden kares kaso chatas. Okay, Rabbi Kiva. So why does Rabbi Kiva then say you have to bring an asham tolei if in fact we're linking it to a chatas, and a chatas is only b'mezid kares b'shoigeg yechayv chatas? Yeah, b'malahon b'kavua avkan b'kavua fuki chatas hatumas amikdash v'kedashiv da'oiv yoridhu. That's only coming to exclude tumas kodesh mikdashav, which again we've learned at great length in the beginning of Horius, that if a person is either enters in the base of mikdash tamei, or they eat some that which is tamei, so then the din is that they are they're chayiv to bring a carbon, but that carbon is not a carbon kavua. It's not a chatas chelev. We call it an oil b'yarid, and when it comes to an oil b'yarid, there's no chiyuv of an asham tali. So it's not that the asham tali we're excluding safek asham me'ilos from a safek me'ilah from an asham tali, but rather kodesh mikdashav, which everyone learns. Says Rashi, safek nichnas tamil lamikdash safek lo nichnas hoyel vaday ba'oil v'yarid. If you know for sure you did it, you're chayav an oil v'yarid. Ain't maybe al sveko asham tali. It's only like a chatas, which is a chatas kavua, not an oil v'yarid. Okay, v'rabanan engzer shavel amechsa. So you can't split it. Rabbi Kiva now means zero shavel meksa and a chanami b'hachbakim efli. Rabbi Kiva savar nim nefesh ksiv. So moisiv vav is moisiv al inyan rishon. So it links the two. Rabbanan nami ksiv yim nefesh. So lim b'hakim efli. The mar sava hekish adif or mar sava gzer shava adif. Maybe it's just based on what is considered to be better. Go the kulam the hekish adif. V'amrucha Rabbanan tachtain hu the gomer me'el yoin will ashim b'kesef shkolim. According to them, they say that it's come to tell you the minimal amount that must be brought when it comes to an asham, that it has to be b'kesef shkolim. That's what it's coming to to tell you. Okay. Shelo taimer loyhe sveiku chomer mavadoi. So we shouldn't say, how could it be they were more strict when it comes to a suffix than a vadai? Ma vadai chatas bas danka. When it comes to bringing a chatas vadai, you only have to bring a bas danka, which is a sixth of a dinner, which basically is no set amount. Av sveiko asham bar danka. So too, you would think also it's not necessary to have to bring, as Rashi says, shonitim lo kitzba. But that's only when we're dealing with a chatas. But when it comes to an asham toloi, we say that there is b'kesef shkolim, that there is a requirement. So that's a chiddush. Rabbi Kiva hay svar minole. How do you know it has to have a minimum amount? Nafkalim is zois teres asham. Zois that they're all the same. So man isle Tyrus. If you don't learn this drasha, how do you learn? So Gamar me'erkacha be'erkacha. So you can learn out from a gzer shava. Tina checha dikse be'erkacha. Ashim shivcha charufa do kosa be'erkacha ma'ikla meimar. Gamar ba'ayil. So when it comes to a shivcha charufa, which the Gemara discusses exactly what that is, different opinions that she was already designated for your eved, and then your person is tashvish with her. So then you have to bring an ashim for that. So anyway, so we have Gzer Shava to teach us this. Okay, there's a bunch of questions that are thrown in here. Look at question 9, I think it is. Yeah. Parshas Ashim Talei Poisachas. It begins with the Vav, Ve'im Nefesh. Most of all, in Rishon, she Parshas Ashim Elois. So there's a link between Ashim Talei and an Ashim Elois. Man Nilmud Eli Matachner Bikima. So, and what do we learn out according to the Rabbanon? So, Eli Matachner, so Rabbi Kiva, it's a machlokas, says that when it comes to Ashim Talei, you're chayav on Safik Me'ilois. The Rabbanon Savri, they hold that you're putter in that case. Taktam Elyon Liknos Asham Tali B'Shnei Saloyim. So there's a minimum requirement. T28. Al Eza Safik Kuliyama in Mavian Asham Tali. And that again is Tumas Mikdas Kadashav. Safik Me'ilos is a machlokas, which is the same question as TB 28, Tumas Kodesh Mikdashav in Mavian, and Be'ezah Suffolk Pligi. So when it comes to Suffolk Me'ilois. Okay, that is question TB 28. Okay, let's keep on moving. So, and for some reason, there's the same question over here. Al Eza Safik Kolyam in Mavian Asham Tali Al Kodesh Mikdashav Shuchayev Ba'oil of Yared the Kolyam of a Safik Me'ilo Seish Machlokas in Mavian Asham Tali Al Zeh. This is actually the first question of the new daf. For some reason, there was an overlap. I think it was a mistake, but that's pretty unbelievable. Good answer, pretty clean. Okay, so Chatas Menolan. To boy Safin. So we said Kachi Kadoshim have to be shachted in the north. How do we know? By a chatas nechsiv, because it's only brought down, as we said, by an oila. So v'shachat das a chatas makam oila ashkach and shchita. So it says beferish, you do like the oila. So kabol manolan. How do we know that kabol also needs to be b'klisharis b'savain? We said, of course, with the exception, the asham atzayir is a little bit more difficult because you need two people to do the kabbalah, one to be makabel the kli for the mizbech and one biyad for the mitzayra. But nonetheless, Kachik Kedoshim are required the makabel dam in the north. It says that Kohen has to take the dam. So makabel atzma minolan. How do we know that the guy himself, the Kohen, has to be in the north? Maybe he could have a big pole with a cup on it, and he's standing in the south, and that's good enough. Omer krav lakach loy yikach ashkel mitzvah akaminayin krach riniksiv v'shachad oisel b'makam asher yishchatas oila. So he has to do it. So therefore, when it comes to the Kabbalah, the Kohen has to be in that location in the north. V'tanya heichen oila nishchata b'safin avzeh b'safin. So just like when it comes to an oila, the shecht in the north, chatas is in the north. Just like the Kabbalah is in the north, so too Ba'achat is in the north, and you need to be physically in the north. Says Rashi, you need to learn this by itself. So the question is, you should basically just figure this out on your own. The pasuk says, it already says it pretty explicitly that you do the exact same thing for chatas as an oil, it's the same. So it must be coming to add that not only is the Kabbalah supposed to be done in the north, but you, the Kohen, have to be in the north. Sheim lo shachta b'safon pasul. If it wasn't shachta in the north, it's pasul. So maybe it means that this guy needs to be in the north. They in acher toyin safon, but nothing else. So Talmud lo shachta as achatas b'makam ha'oila. So zeb ben ya'av l'chol chatas. For all chatas, you to una safon. When it comes to every chatas, it has to be in the north. Ashkan seir nasi. I understand when it comes to the sa'ir, in which the king has to bring, when he makes a mistake, bein lo mitzvah, bein lo akev, he's required. So shar chatois nami ashkachan lo mitzvah lo akev. Menon, how do we know? This pasuk is only talking about a seir nasi. Because we also find the pasuk says, in Vayikra, it says, the samach as yadu al roish chatos, you do smich on the chatos, the shachat oisel chatos, and you shecht it oil in the same place. So I think that's the pasuk I was supposed to quote, maybe. B'kisva, and that's referring to a she lamb. B'ksiv b'seira, and it's also written the same thing by a seira. Actually, beautiful. The Torah, or in parentheses, it says by Gimel, it's kisva chatas shel yachid, and we just quoted the seira chatas shel yachid, because a yachid can bring either one when it comes to a chatas, a kisva or a seira. So either one, you fulfill your chatas obligation. Why that when it comes to the seir chatas shel nasi, does it say v'samach yado al rosh hasoyer v'shachat oisoi? Why does it have to say it by there? Right? If all the chatases are the same, why does it have to say it over there? That he does it. That only when it comes to this chatas is it required to be in the north, but not when it comes to the sa'ir of nachshoin. Look at Rashi. It keeps repeating it, whether it's a kispa or seira, or when it comes to the nasi who brings the sagli b'seira. Just mention it by one. The telf minei kispa la mitzvah ki hader kasvel b'kisva. Why does it repeat it? Tunul inyan lepanemius useira haragom ikuva. It's coming to include other stuff. However, bein sar nachshin seira chanuka sanasiyim shobal chet, because it was brought as the inauguration by the different leaders, the Nesiim, as is at the end of Parshas Naso. So they did not sin. So they actually could have brought this carbon not in the north. V'tanya v'samach yado al rosh hasoil rabos ser nachshin was smicha der Rabbi Yehuda. It's just coming to tell you that smicha needed to be done by the sa'ir nachshin. However, not that it was required that the shechita had to be done b'safin. That when it comes to the sira avodas chachavim, you also have to do smicha on that. So it's not going to be kamash mulan. The chiddush is, you would think that just like you have to do smicha, you would think that the shechita also had to be in the north, kamash mulan. That it doesn't have to be in the north. Maskav Rabbeinu Hanichla Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon Ma'ika Meimar Hanichla Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon Ma'ika Meimar Omer Marzuta Bereda Rabbi Tabi Rabbeinu Rabbi Yehuda Minicha. Is it so good according to him? L'mayid is Rabbi, Madol is Rabbi, Lo is Rabbi. What it comes to include, it should include. What it doesn't come to include, shouldn't include. Says Rashi, Daha Riboy Gabi Smicha Ksiv, a Safin Mehechetesi. Right? So it's only talking about Smicha. So how would you know anything about Safin? V'chitema Ilum Atikra, if it wasn't excluded, it wasn't a meat in the Pasuk, Tavimina Tesi B'Binyanav. You can learn out of Binyan Av, that the fact that it says Shachat Asachatos, so in Kain Smicha Gufa Tesim Binyan Av. El Mediris Lo Gamrinan. So the reason is you can't learn out Mediris. So just because it was done a particular way once doesn't mean necessarily it can be applied. So this is the maskan over here, that only the carbon has to be in the north, but not the person. The person doesn't have to do the shechita in the north. Shoichet mid Rabbi, so that's the chiddush. Mid Rabbi Achi nafka. The stand Rabbi Achi oimer the shachat oiso al yeracham mizbech. Savoina has to be done in the north. Matam with the oimer. What's say oisoi? Vishmatzinu oimid but safon mekabel but savoin. If you're standing in the north and you mekabel down in the north, v'im amad badarim. Let's say you're standing in the south. The kibul but savoin, but you do the kabbalah in the north. Puzzle. Yochel av zekein by shchita should be the same thing. Which means it's true, the Kabbalah, the person physically has to be in the north. However, when it comes to shchita, the person doesn't have to be in the north. So we already know that. So because of that, we have to make a new drasha that only in ben of b'safin. This requirement is not by a bird. The sign Yochli ben oiv toin safoin bedinu. You would think when it comes to a bird, also the din should be in the north. The shechita ma ben soin. When it comes to a sheep, a behema, shul kavaloi koyin. That there's not a set koyin. Kavaloi safon has to be in the north. So ben oiv shekavaloi koyin and din shekavaloi safon talmud oisoi. So when it comes to what does that mean? The pasuk says v'hikrib hakoyin el hamizbeach umolak es roishoi. So, since it says Beferish that this guy is the one who's supposed to do Malika, the one who brings it close is supposed to do Malika. So, like we're designating a specific kayin, so if we're strict, then we should also require that it should be done in the north. Also, only by Behema, but not the bird. So, ma ben soyin shechein kavaloi kli. So, and say, well, it's not really a kula, because we know when it comes to ben soin, there's a kli, which is Rashi says a sakin l'shchita. Term ben oiv shemal b'sparno. We know it's not the same. One is a knife and one is cutting with malika, with a nail. So you wouldn't necessarily think, there was so much more makel when it comes to so much more machmir when it comes to a bird. It's not true. You don't even need a knife. El osa b'safan mean pesach b'safan. Now, when it comes to the carbon pesach, it doesn't have to be done in the north. The Stan Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer Yachol me pesach toin safan v'dinu. You think the carbon pesach has to be in the north, and I'll show you why. Ma oila shloi kavaloi zman. There's no set time. You can bring on oila basically any time. Which Lishchitaso kavol safan, but it has to be in the north. So pesach shekavol zman. It's a set time. Lishchitaso and the din shekavol safan tamam also. So rolling up from carbon pesach does not have to be in the north. So ma oila shechin kol. You want to tell me that a pesach is more strict because it has to be at a set time, but it's not burnt. It's not kol like an ola. Ola is more strict. No machatas. So it can learn out from machatas, which is not kol. That's also not a set time. Yeah, machatas shechin machaperes al chavi krisus. So it has it's a strong carbon. It can be machaper. Okay, ma'asham. So an asham is machaper, but not machaper and krisus. Of course, kares is bemazed, but it's still b'shoigeg. It's linked to a punishment bemazed of kares. Ma'asham mal asham shechein kachik kadashim. And Pesach is kadashim kalim. So makulam nami shechein kachik kadashim. You could ask the same question regarding all of them. You could have just started with that, and it's true. It's still you can't. You don't say Pesach is more chomer because it's koven zman. You're right. This is the drasha. Oiso is to tell you that only the animal must be there, but the person doesn't have to be in the north. But the kashlach Rabbi Achia nafkal, and I thought we already learned this drush out somewhere else, so why do you need Osa to teach it? So there is still the chiddush that you can make a diuk that only when it comes to shchita do we say this kula, that the person doesn't have to be there, as long as you have like a long knife. But when it comes to Kabbalah, the person who does the Kabbalah must physically be there as well. Okay. So Makabel Malakach V'lakach Nafka. I thought we learned that already from Gzer Shav. Malakach V'lakach L'mashmalei. Okay. Ashkechan Shchita. We could stop there, but let's just keep going a little bit further. Ashkechan Shchita. Actually, let's go look at questions. Question 10. Kachi Kedoshim Shchitas Masafin Kibudam B'Kli Sharis Masafin. Ha'im HaShaykhin Makabel As Medinim Nami Masafin. So the Shaykhin, the person, right, does not need to be standing in the north. However, when he's makabel the dam, that person has to be suffering. That's question. That's in TH29. Exactly the same question. Shayche in sarich makabel sarich suffering, and this is also TB29, but it's also question 2, which is kind of funny, but it's what it is. TB29. So I don't have to read it, but let's see, did I get the question right is the main thing. Beautiful. That's the correct answer. It's always nice to see that. Okay, let's keep going. Let's go a little bit further. Ashkechan shchita ba'oila l'mitzvah kabbalah nami l'mitzvah ashkechan. So we established when it comes to shchita, it has to be in the north. The animal has to be in the north. The Kabbalah has to be done in the north. Even the person has to be in the north. So shchita Kabbalah akim and on. How do you know it's ma'akiv? Rabbi Barava, B'hitima Rabba Bar Shila Kavachimer. Machatas haba mikaya chayla. That we said the whole reason why the chatas has to be brought in the north is because the pasuk says by the sign of an oila it has to be in the north. Makeves oila. So we know it's makeves. Makeves. So oila sheba chatas mekaycha in odin shemakeves. So we already know that when it comes to a chatos that it's ma'akev because of the extra psukim. So when it comes to an oila which sheba chatas mekaycha in odin shemakeves certainly. Yabamal chatas shemachaperes al chayvi krisus. Maybe chatas or because it's has this din of it's so important because it's able to mechaper, so maybe it's different than an oila, which is its purpose is really as a dainain. It's true as we saw elsewhere. It could at least accomplish some potential for an asay. I'm Ravina hakashale Ravad Barava klumatzinu tafel chomer min ikr. We never find that the tafel, the secondary, is more strict than the main. So the Ola, therefore, by the Safon is Ma'akiv. Since by the Ola it says Beferish that it needs to be B'Safon, and we learned out when it comes to the Chatas that it has to be B'Safon in Le'ikuva. Obviously, and that's only the Tafel, the Chatas is the Tafel because you only learn it from the Ola, so obviously an oil as well. Is that true? We don't find such a thing. Vahari Meiser. When it comes to Meiser Sheni, which is brought on years 1, 2, 4, and 5 to Yerushalayim, Dehu Nifte, that the din is, if it's too heavy, you could be poided, but it's supposed to be poided outside of Yerushalayim and bring the money in. But, says Rashi, Afil Yerushalayim im Nitma. Let's say that became Tameh, so in Yerushalayim, you actually are allowed to do so, because it says, Mulot Suchal Seiso, Ve'en Seis El Achila. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't carry it, it means you can't eat it, right? Obviously, if it's too heavy, you're not going to be able to eat it in your shalayim. It's too heavy to bring. But also, if it's tummy, you could even be pointed in your shalayim. V'ilu lakuach b'kesef. However, let's say you bought the fruit from money, b'kesef meiser enu nifta ditnan halokech b'kesef meiser shenitma yifta v'yehuda omer yikaver. So we actually see that the tuffle could be more chomer than the ikr, because the ikr, the real fruit, you could be poida in your shalayim if it comes tameh. However, if you bought fruit from that money, let's say you actually had money and then you went to your shalayim and you bought that fruit, so this is tuffle, but it still has a kedusha meiser sheni, that fruit becomes tameh, then you can't. So we see that this din actually does apply, that the tuffle could be more chomer than the ikr. So maybe you should say the same thing by chatas to an oilam. So nitma in lo nitma lo hasam loy alima kedushose lo mitvas pidyaine. So what does that mean? Over there, we don't say that the kedusha is so strong that to be matvis, to be poida it. In other words, the fact is, to be poida, it takes a certain kedusha, a certain potency. So that potency of being able to be poida is davka when it comes to the ikr. When it comes to the tafel, it's not because we're more chomer, it's just because it doesn't have the same kedusha as, if you will, as the original. And therefore, because of that, it's not chumrah. And that it's just because it's just a practicality, because it's like secondary, it's not the real thing, so therefore you can't be poida. It's not because of a chumrah. It's just a practicality that it doesn't have the strength. Vahari Tamura. How about when it comes to Tamura? Let's get to the dot. The ilu kadashim l'chayli. So when it comes to Tamura, it's not kadashim l'chayli al bal mum kabua. The ihi chayli. So you can't make a bal mum kodesh, which is the ikr, but yet if you do tamura on an animal, even if it's a bal mum kavua, there's a din tamura on that bal mum. So we see it's a chumrah. So tamura mikoyach kadashim ka'asya. Tamura is only coming from the original source of kedusha. To kadashim mikoyach chulin ka'asi, and kodshim is coming from chulin. In other words, it's not the same thing. Let's see if Rashi explains it. Techilas hektish enochal al balmum is because if it's a balmum, you're talking about an animal. Everything is chulin, right? And you want to make an animal kodesh, so it has to have the din that it's not a balmum for it to become kodesh, in order to be able to obtain kedusha saguf. However, when it comes to once it's already a kedusha, so then to transfer that on is not as difficult. All right, that's the idea. Hari Pesach to enu toin smich and the sachim the tuvas chazav shaik. It's different than a shlomim, right? In that a Pesach bismanoi, if you shecht it on afternoon of the 14th of Nisan, it doesn't require all these things. You don't do smicha and the sachim to nufa chazav shaik. It is true that we saw a drasha that we do bring certain sacrificial parts onto the mizbeach even from a Pesach, but we don't do these things. Ilu meiser didei, it was left over, or let's say whatever the time you didn't bring it, right? So we say that the din of a carbon Pesach after Pesach takes upon itself the din of a shlomim, and we know a shlomim toin smich and the sachim tenuvas chaz v'shaik. So the Pesach during the right time, which is the ikr time. So we're pretty lenient, but when it's the tuffle time, right, and it takes upon itself of a shlomim, so it has more chomer. So where it says Pesach b'sharimos hashana shlomim hu, it's not because it's more chomer; it just takes upon itself a new status. It's not called the Moiser Pesach. It now has the name of a shlomim. It says as totally different answer, says Rashi. We'll learn it out from this pasuk. So this is repeated. That always has to be in that place. And often when something is repeated, the first time we say is mitzvah, the second is equal, so we can find a second pasuk that usually supports that concept. Question 11. So we saw that when it comes to balmum kavua, right? Timur is chal and balmum kavua, and then we said, why is that not chomor? Why is that not a chomor? Kivan de timura mikoya kadashim kaasya. A timura is linked. There's now a holy animal. It's already kadash. But when it comes to the first step, it's just mamish chulin. Uluhabi timura tafel klapi chulin. Okay, so it's like you're not comparing the same two things. Okay, maybe TA. Okay, TA 29 we saw. TA 30 we didn't. Okay, Adkan.